Perfect. Sounds good, Jen. Thank you. So we're going to start here in a couple minutes. I'm going to let the room kind of fill up a little bit more. And let's start. Start time is 3:10. So, hello, my name is Mark Dahl. I'm a CEO of research and development for a company known as Green Soil Solution. Our main product is a Blossom Booster. Today, I'm going to be discussing the future nutrient demand of the cannabis industry. We're really going to address the shortages of vital plant nutrition. Uh, kind of a fertilizer 101 to kind of set the scene. So plants require 16 plus nutrients to achieve their most potential for their genetics. This includes macronutrients known as the NPK, which is your nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and then your micronutrients, the kind of the building block for the NPK, which is your calcium, magnesium, sulfur, and boron. And then your trace minerals. These are your iron, your zinc, manganese, copper. So the best way I can kind of explain nutrient feed is it's kind of like a pyramid. You get your NPK up top, followed by your micronutrients lower, and then your trace minerals to help build good building block for plant nutrition to reach their greatest potential for their genetics. So we're going to jump into a couple types of fertilizers and nutrients commonly used in the cannabis industry especially. So you got your water soluble, which kind of comes from, they break down in water, they dissolve in water. A lot of people feed them through drip lines. Your hydroponics is another great example of water soluble. And you also have a salt based, which are normally more on the synthetic side. They're basically nutrients bound by sodium, usually sodium base, which is a salt. And you have your citrate soluble. These refer more to your more natural mineral based fertilizers, most commonly found in soil and rich soil. And then you have your mined nutrients. Normally include your gypsum and triple rock phosphate or your rock phosphate. Then next would be your synthetic, which derives from normally some form of petroleum or lab created. And you have your compost and organics. So this is what compost is basically broke down organic matter, and your organics include your manures and stuff along that line. A little bit of bone meal, blood meal. A lot come from basically livestock industry. Next up, we're going to talk about water soluble. So it dissolves or breaks down in water. Can wash or leach from grow mediums as well. A lot of synthetics, almost all your synthetics are water soluble, including a wide range of others. Compost teas along that way are all water soluble for the most part, and it will feed the plant directly with little remains long in the soil. So due to heavy rains, sometimes even high heat will evaporate them. So a lot of times with water-soluble fertilizer, even though you're putting big NPK numbers down, it's really only taking advantage of maybe 15 to 20% of what you put on, and that's even high numbers. So irrigation feeding is most common. Drip lines, ebb and flow systems, anything along that line. Kind of unstable storage. Don't have an extremely long shelf life. If it gets wet, they're normally gone. Or if they're too hot, they tend to evaporate or weaken in strength. We're going to touch on mined as our next one. So most commonly mined nutrient is rock phosphate, and it is not renewable. There is only so much of this source, and the supply is very limited. The demand is extremely high. So by 2035, our demand will overcome the supply of rock phosphate. It also tends to leach into waterways and destroys land from land strip mining. Synthetic fertilizer, once again, normally comes from a natural gas or petroleum source, almost all lab created. And then once again with the salts, it's normally some form of nutrient bound by salt, which can lead to big salt buildup along the roots. This normally is why flushing before harvest is so common, because you're trying to wash out the excess salts left in the soil. So we're going to talk a little bit about the darker side of fertilizer, nutrient leaching and contamination. So over the years, massive amounts of synthetic and water-soluble fertilizers being used has led to algae blooms. You're ever familiar with anything down in Florida, especially in the late spring, you encounter a lot of red tide and dead zones, and the problem has only gotten worse, increasing every year. And most of that comes due to our watershed contamination from these heavy synthetics, basically putting these heavy NPKs on, and the plant not being able to break it all down, either due to the lack of trace minerals or micro minerals, or just a matter of excessive rainfall or water. Most fertilizers will flush from the soil before a plant can even benefit from them sometimes, if timing is incorrect and you get excessive water, especially in the outdoor. And even in the indoor, a lot runs down the drains sometimes, especially your ebb and flows and stuff like that. If you have, an ebb and flow to waste, especially. So it kind of gathers up into our waterways sooner or later, and it can really lead to some serious problems for our waterways. So let's take a little step back, and a little different approach at plant nutrition would be a citrate soluble. So citrate soluble means that either the acidic of the soil or the plant's root system breaks it down. Most commonly, always normally mineral based, breaks down due to the root's acid and other plant acids. Humic acid, a big one, found in normally loamy and healthy soils. And it's very long lasting. There's really no risk of burn because you're not really force feeding the plant. You're just making sure the minerals and nutrients are there for the plant to take advantage of. And there's normally little to no leaching due to it being mineral based, due to it not being dissolved by water or break it down. So we're going to talk a little bit about phosphorus. Phosphorus is the second most abundant mineral in the human body. It is present in every cell and mostly found in your bones and teeth. So available to plants as a phosphate. So phosphorus is a big building block for plant growth, and for cannabis growers especially, this is what you're looking for to really establish great blossoms, great buds, great colas, as long as root and plant structure. Excuse me. It also is just a really fundamental element to proper plant growth. Even if you're looking at fiber and seed production in industrial hemp, you're still needing that phosphate to be able to push through for grains and to create good cell structure for the plant stem. Many states regulate the use of phosphate due to leaching and watershed runoff. Once again, you get around the Great Lakes area or anything, it is extremely regulated just due to a lot of triple rock phosphate running off and the plant never being able to take advantage of the full nutritional feed due to basically a lack of trace or micro minerals. So now we're going to talk a little bit more about the red tide and dead zones. It really became a serious problem, and it's really caught media attention. Because the kind of last thing you want to do is go to I would kind of picking on Florida, but that's where a lot of these numbers come from. So you go down to the beach to enjoy a nice summer in Florida, and then you have a lot of this dead marine life. And it's just extremely unhealthy for our ocean systems, and it's extremely unhealthy for even human beings and birds and everything that goes along with that ecosystem. So red tide is nothing new, but has increased the algae blooms with the surplus of extreme extra nutrients from fertilizer runoff. Obviously, 2018 being one of the worst. Just this year of June 22nd, 2021, 66 tons of dead marine life have already been cleaned up by crews. That is a massive amount. Just kind of put that into perspective. That's probably honestly like 66 truckloads, big dump truckloads of dead marine life. And that's just what has made it to the beach and made it to landfall. So, let's look at more of a solution. How do we prevent these dead zones and these red tides and these algae blooms that have been devastating not only our oceans, but also our Great Lakes, along with our rivers, not just here in the United States, but around the world. Making fertilizer more efficient with the use of micros and trace minerals, including micro-life activity to help break down these nutrients to feed to the plants. Especially these large macros that we throw down. Kind of the fertilizers really became the language of NPK. But once again, 16 plus elements are needed for optimum growth. So if we're only using 3, we're really coming up with a shortfall of everything required to really push our plants and push our product to its true potential. Citrate soluble fertilizers, which are energy efficient fertilizers, EEF compliant, will become the new practice in the coming years as restrictions increase to slow down the runoff issues in our watershed areas, especially in the Great Lake areas where we really have ran into this, including Florida as well. They're really looking and trying to push this EFF compliancy in the at-risk areas to help slow down these algae blooms, these red tides, and these dead zones. So addressing the demand for phosphate. Once again, our supply and demand is just quickly catching up. There's only so much supply, and the demand has only increased, and it's only going to continue to increase as more and more states come online, either with full legalization or even our hemp. We have a massive increasing hemp industry every year. It has just been growing by leaps and bounds, and especially if we're growing for CBD or CBG or any other cannabinoid or terpene, we're really going to be looking for phosphate. So that's only going to further diminish the supply and increase demand. So what can we do about it? We can try to reclaim our runoffs to the best of our ability. This kind of goes back to indoor growers with, some form of hydro system, trying to recirculate and reclaim as much as possible. It's kind of hard to do more in a field setting, except maybe a boundary crop is often used along the field edges. And then we also can get wastewater recirculating. So once again, trying to recirculate what wastewater we do have to try to get the most out of what we're putting on our fields or on our plants. Bone meal is another option. Comes from the livestock industry. Bone meal is most common from more of the slaughterhouse side. Blood meal kind of falls under this as well. But once again, there's only so much, only so much beef is slaughtered every year, and only so much goes to bone meal. Feather meal would also be included in this, and blood meal. So, and next is, constantly looking into the future, trying to develop new technologies, developing technologies to create and increase phosphate and phosphorus where we can. And then it comes up to what we do with green soil and our blossom booster. So we're going to step into the green soil solution. So we've have worked really hard to reclaim as much as we can from seawater, from ocean water, from kind of once again reclaiming this runoff and creating a citrate soluble crystal that's able to be broke down by the plant's roots. So it's a one dose nutrient that the plant's roots break down to feed at a slower rate as a plant needs it and helps condition soils. Once again, contains the trace minerals, the micronutrients, and the macronutrients in one form. We have an NPK of 529.40 potassium, along with your magnesium, your boron, your manganese, and every element that the plant requires for optimum growth. Combined into our crystal. And as it releases, it does a very slow, nice, soft feed, which really helps even with water-soluble fertilizers by providing those trace and micro minerals. If you want to boost a little bit more nitrogen, some plants are a little different feeders. Sometimes you want a little bit more nitrogen. Sometimes you need to push a little more phosphate halfway through flower. Sometimes you run into a lot of stresses and pests where you want to increase your potassium to help the plants recover and deal with these stresses, whether it be disease or pest. So having those extra micronutrients, those trace minerals, will also help these large NPKs break down even better and perform better. So less than 2% of Blossom Booster is water soluble. So there's very little to no leaching. It stays in grow mediums where it's needed. There's no burn risk because you are not force feeding a plant. You're not trying to push these massive amounts of nitrogen on. There's this little slow release every time one of our crystals breaks down of that 5 nitrogen, which not only helps during growth, but also helps with the efficiencies most commonly found in the early stages of flower during stretch, during your massive stretch. And it also can be used in conjunction with other fertilizers, normally with a 50 to 75% reduction in current fertilizer programs. So this is, to pick a handful of, water solubles out there. There's many, many companies. A lot of people really love what they use. So, but a lot of the problem is you're lacking your trace and micronutrients to really push the plants to their full potential. And I always suggest somebody at least does a 75% reduction at first and then slowly increases to prevent the water soluble from burning the plant. If you strictly just use our Blossom Booster, our green soil, you will not encounter burn. But if you're trying to push these super high nitrogens alongside of it, the water soluble fertilizer will burn it. And there's only one application needed for growth in the flower stages. You apply it normally from seedling or clone at your first transplant to help take a lot of the shock out of the plant is what we really notice, especially in transplants. A lot of people will sometimes encounter at least 3-day transplant shock. I normally encounter less than a day or like 3 hours of a little bit of shock, and they perk right up just due to them having a good mineral base to instantly recover from. And we always try to put it in the plant's root system. A top dress can be used. It's very slow. It takes longer because you're trying to get all that nutrients down into that plant root system. So I always advise when using Blossom Booster to always try to get it around the root zone. If the plant's already established, you can always do a spike around your drip edge, basically the edge of your leaves. You go down, directly down from that, and that's where you apply it. So as the plant grows, it's able to have access to that. A spike merely is a hole sometimes punched in your soil or grow medium with our powder applied directly in the hole, and the plant will find it. And that really simplifies a lot of labor for these larger farmers and stuff along there, because sometimes you might be fertilizing every other day, if not every day at some periods, with water solubility, where you're able to have a one application to where you have the steady feed constantly instead of water soluble where you feed, it spikes, it comes down, it feeds, it spikes, it comes down. But with Green Soil Solution, you have this constant nice feed throughout to help plant really take out the stresses. So it's not getting jacked up on nutrients and then dropping and then getting high in nutrients and dropping. So it has a very steady, consistent feed throughout, and that is where we just have really shined because we take a lot of the dips and highs and peaks out of the fertilizer program to where the plant has a steady, nutritious, slow release feed. So you ever need to contact us either about product or any kind of questions, we're almost always readily available on our website at blossombooster.com or greensoilsolution.com. No S on solutions. It's Green Soil Solution because there's only one solution. There's any other questions, never be afraid to reach out. I'll also be available for roundtables as the day progresses and tomorrow. So hope you appreciated the presentation and you learned something. And thank you for your time. You guys have a wonderful day.